They told you cash was dirty. They told you it spread disease. They told you it was outdated, inefficient, the relic of a dying world. And maybe you believed them. Maybe you tapped your phone at the register and felt modern, felt safe, felt like you were moving forward. But what if I told you that every argument against cash was engineered? What if the death of the dollar bill wasn't progress, but a prison being built around you, one transaction at a time? This is the story they don't want you to understand. The story of how freedom became a line of code and how that code can be erased. Picture a world where every coffee you buy, every donation you make, every book you read leaves a permanent fingerprint. A world where your money can be programmed to expire, where your savings can be frozen, not by a judge, not by a jury, but by an algorithm that decided you thought the wrong thing. That world isn't science fiction. It's being built right now. And the blueprint has been in plain sight for over a decade. It began, as most revolutions do, with a crisis. 2008, the year the towers of finance crumbled, not from planes, but from greed. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Bear Stearns vanished. The world watched as trillions of dollars evaporated like morning fog. And in that chaos, in that fear, a question was planted in the minds of the powerful. How do we make sure this never happens again? How do we control the chaos? The answer wasn't regulation. It wasn't reform. The answer was surveillance, dressed in the language of innovation. Central bankers around the world began whispering about a new kind of money, not printed on paper, not minted in metal, but born in servers, tracked in databases, controlled by code. They called it CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency, and they promised it would make everything better. Faster payments, financial inclusion, the end of crime, the end of tax evasion, the end of dirty money. But here's what they didn't tell you. They didn't tell you that every CBDC ever proposed includes the ability to decide when, where, and how you can spend your own money. They didn't tell you that in China, digital yuan has already been programmed to expire, forcing citizens to spend before a deadline or lose their savings. They didn't tell you that in Nigeria, the naira was used to track protesters and freeze their funds within hours. They didn't tell you that the European Central Bank has discussed carbon limits, where your spending could be capped based on your environmental footprint. This isn't conspiracy. This is policy. This is published. This is happening. But for any of this to work, for the digital prison to close its doors, one thing must happen first. Cash must die. And the war on cash has been raging for longer than you realize. Think back, 2016, India. The government announced, with just 4 hours' notice, that 86% of all currency in circulation was now worthless. 501,000 rupee notes, gone. Over 1 billion people were told to stand in line, sometimes for days, to exchange their life savings. The official reason: to fight corruption, to catch tax evasion, to modernize the economy. But what actually happened? The poor suffered most. Street vendors, farmers, day laborers, people who had never cheated the system in their lives lost everything. Meanwhile, the wealthy, the truly corrupt, had already moved their money offshore into gold, into real estate. The demonetization didn't catch criminals. It punished the innocent. And it taught governments around the world a terrifying lesson. People will accept it. If you wrap oppression in the language of progress, they will accept it. Sweden wants to land of Viking independence. Now, the most cashless society on Earth in 2023, less than 8% of all transactions involve physical money. Churches accept donations via app. Homeless shelters take contactless payments. Even children's lemonade stands have QR codes. And the Swedish government has been remarkably honest about what comes next. They've published reports discussing negative interest rates, where your digital money loses value the longer you hold it, a tax on saving, a punishment for prudence. But you might be thinking, this is Europe, this is Asa, this couldn't happen in America, this couldn't happen in the land of the free. Let me tell you about Executive Order 14067, March 2022. The Biden administration signed an order directing the entire federal government to study the creation of a digital dollar, The Treasury, the Fed, the Commerce Department, all of them tasked with one mission: design the infrastructure for a central bank digital currency. The order used words like responsible innovation and consumer protection, but buried in the technical reports that followed were phrases that should chill any free person's blood: programmable money, conditional transactions, identity-linked wallets. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, in partnership with MIT, built a prototype called Hamilton, named after the founding father who believed in centralized banking. The prototype demonstrated transaction speeds of over 100,000 per second, fast enough to track every purchase, every transfer, every financial heartbeat of 330 million Americans. And here's where the story turns dark. For a CBDC to function, for the surveillance to be complete, cash must be eliminated. Not reduced, eliminated, because as long as physical money exists, there is an escape hatch, a way to transact without permission, a way to exist without being watched. And that is unacceptable to those who seek total control. The campaign has already begun. Banks across America are closing branches. ATM fees have risen by over 40% in the last decade. Some retailers now refuse cash entirely, citing efficiency. Insurance companies charge higher premiums for cash businesses. Regulators have imposed reporting requirements on any cash transaction over $10,000, and recently proposed lowering that threshold to $6,000. They're not banning cash. That would be too obvious. They're making it inconvenient, expensive, suspicious. They're making you choose digital and calling it freedom. But what happens when there is no choice? If you're feeling something right now, if there's a knot forming in your stomach, good, that means you're paying attention, and what comes next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about money, privacy, and power. If this is resonating with you, if you want to understand what they're really building, subscribe now, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Let's talk about what CBDCs can actually do. Imagine you receive your paycheck, not as a deposit in your bank account, but as tokens in a government wallet. Tokens that know who you are, where you live, what you've purchased. Now imagine those tokens have rules. Maybe they can only be spent at approved merchants. Maybe they expire in 90 days. Maybe they can't be used to buy firearms, or tobacco, or donations to political organizations deemed problematic. This isn't speculation. This is documented capability. The Bank for International Settlements, the Central Bank of Central Banks, published a report in 2021 explicitly discussing programmable money. They used the euphemism purpose-bound money, money that can only be used for its intended purpose. But who decides the purpose? Who decides what you're allowed to buy? In China, the social credit system has already merged with digital payments. Low score, your ability to travel is restricted. Your access to loans is denied. Your children's school applications are flagged. And all of this happens automatically. No trial, no appeal, just an algorithm and a consequence. You might think, I have nothing to hide. Why should I care? But ask yourself this. Would you have nothing to hide in 1950s America if you attended a civil rights meeting? Would you have nothing to hide in 1930s Germany if you helped a Jewish neighbor? Would you have nothing to hide in colonial times if you discussed independence from the king? Privacy isn't about hiding wrongdoing. Privacy is about preserving the space where dissent can breathe, where new ideas can form, where individuals can exist outside the gaze of power. Every tyrant in history understood this. Every surveillance state has known that the first step to control is visibility. You cannot punish what you cannot see. And digital currency makes everything visible. The founding fathers understood money differently than we do today. They had lived under the British pound, a currency controlled by a distant monarchy. They knew that economic freedom was inseparable from political freedom. That's why the Constitution gave Congress, not a private bank, the power to coin money. That's why early Americans insisted on gold and silver. Money that couldn't be printed into oblivion. Money that couldn't be tracked. But over the centuries, that protection eroded. 1913, the Federal Reserve was born, a private institution given the power to create money. They promised stability, They delivered inflation. The dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power since then. But that wasn't enough. The money masters wanted more. Nixon closed the gold window. The last thread connecting dollars to something real was severed. From that moment forward, money became pure abstraction, pure faith, pure control, and now ... the final step. Money that exists only as permission. Permission that can be revoked. Would you trust your life savings to a system that can freeze your account because you shared the wrong article? Would you trust your family's future to a currency that expires if you do UNT spend it according to schedule? Would you trust your freedom to money that knows every purchase you've ever made and can predict every purchase you'll make next? The central bankers say, trust us, but history screams otherwise. Every financial crisis of the last century was created or worsened by central bank policy. The Great Depression was deepened by Fed tightening. The 2008 crash was inflated by easy money policies. The current inflation was ignited by unprecedented money printing during the pandemic. These are not accidents. These are features. Crises justify expansion of control. Fear demands solutions. And the solution they're offering is the very system that will ensure you can never escape again. But there is hope. There are those who see what's coming. Across America, state legislatures are waking up. Texas passed a law protecting the right to use cash. Tennessee proposed banning CBDCs entirely within state borders. Florida's governor signed legislation prohibiting digital dollars in state transactions. These are small victories, but they prove something important. Resistance is possible. And then there's the parallel economy being built by those who refuse to comply. Farmers markets accepting gold and silver, local businesses creating barter networks, communities rediscovering what it means to trade face-to-face, handshake to handshake, without a server recording every exchange. This isn't about rejecting technology. It's about rejecting surveillance. It's about remembering that money was invented to serve humanity, ... not to enslave it. The question is no longer whether CBDCs are coming. They are. The Bank of England has announced the digital pound by 2020. The European Central Bank is piloting the digital euro. The Fed continues its research despite public opposition. The question is whether you will be ready, whether you will have preserved some portion of your wealth, your privacy, your freedom outside their system. What would you do if tomorrow your bank account was frozen? Not because you committed a crime, but because an algorithm flagged your behavior. Would you have options? Would you have stored some wealth in forms they can't touch? In gold that has preserved value for 5,000 years? In silver that cannot be deleted? In land that exists outside the cloud? These aren't the questions of conspiracy theorists. These are the questions of people who have studied history, who have watched empires rise and fall, who understand that the concentration of power always ... always abuse. The digital dollar is not about convenience. It's about control. It's about creating a system where permission replaces ownership, where compliance replaces freedom, where every financial decision you make is visible, trackable, and revocable. And the only thing standing between that future and today ... is cash, dirty, inefficient, anonymous, beautiful cash. The last privacy you have, the last transaction you can make without permission. They will tell you it's about fighting crime. They will tell you it's about stopping terrorism. They'll tell you it's about efficiency and inclusion and progress. They will use every argument, every fear, every crisis to convince you that surveillance is safety. But remember this, every prison promises security. Every cage offers protection. The question is whether you're willing to trade your freedom for the illusion of safety. The founders of this nation chose liberty over comfort. They chose uncertainty over submission. They understood that freedom requires vigilance. That power must always be questioned. That convenience is often the disguise tyranny wears when it wants to be invited in. So what will you choose? Will you tap your phone and feel modern? Or will you ask who's watching? Will you accept the digital dollar because it's easy? Or will you demand the right to exist without permission? The vault has been opened. The secrets have been revealed, but knowledge without action is just entertainment. And this ... this is not entertainment. This is your future. your children's future, the future of every person who believes that freedom is worth defending. If this opens your eyes, if you feel that chill down your spine, then you understand why this matters. And if you want to see what's coming next, what they're planning that makes CBDCs look like the beginning, then subscribe. Because in the next episode, we're going to reveal the 13 families who have controlled global finance for over 200 years and what they're building while you sleep. The question isn't whether you can handle the truth. The question is whether you're willing to seek it. The vault remains open. For now.